Hello, everyone, and welcome to Open Dial from the British Alliance of Watch and Clockmakers. An hour of insightful and we hope interesting conversations about horology. Today, I'd like to start by saying thank you to our sponsor, A Collected Man, an always elegant website about watches, and also give a shout out to our buds in New York. Hey, Big Apple, the Horological Society of New York. Now, we're very fortunate this evening because we're going to be talking to one of the world's great watchmakers, Bob Bray of Sinclair Harding. But before we start peppering Bob with a lot of questions, please start sending in the questions because we really want to try to tax Bob. We're going to watch a little program about him and his work. So let's start that. Technical boys, let's go.
My name's Bob Bray, and I've been the custodian of Sinclair Harding since 1995. I'd like to welcome you all to this exclusive Open Dial event on behalf of the Alliance of British Watch and Clockmakers. I hope this tour of our clockmaking workshop will give you a flavour of what Sinclair Harding are about and enable you to meet the team behind the clockmaking process. So the whole process starts with the design. A lot of ideas come from our customers, and they can be either in the form of discussions, sketches, or more often than not nowadays we get renderings of final clocks from our customers. SolidWorks allows us to produce lots of information for the whole business. It in fact drives the whole business. So from the top level assembly we can start to break down into sub-assemblies. We can create bills of materials, we can generate stock lists, and we can generate lists for the workshop to produce the parts.
I'm Georgie, I'm Bob's daughter, and in here we are in the stock control room. This is our heart of the operation, so this is where all the machine parts are kept. And when we're in here, once we've produced our stock control sheets, we then go through and kit the clocks.
Over the last 20 years, we've invested very heavily in the state-of-the-art machines. We're not ashamed to have CNC machines. We feel it's very important to achieve the precision and quality of the component parts for each clock. So here we have a CNC wire machine, and this uses a small diameter wire, 0.25 millimeters in diameter, and we're just machining the crossings on this gear wheel. So this is the component. This is the part that came out of the component. So you can see it cuts a very thin groove through the material. Here we're making a 60-tooth deadbeat escape wheel for our 3-train chime-in clock. We're actually machining it using a 1mm cutter. So these are the plates for the back plates for the 3-train chime-in skeleton clock. These have come straight off the wire machine. We will have wired these in a stack of 5. So we've wired all the crossings. And from there they go on to this machining centre over here. This is a high-spec machine, 24,000 RPM, 25 tools. And this machine we will put all the pivot holes in and we will machine the outside profile.
Okay, I hope you all enjoyed that. And I must apologize because I confused watches and clocks a moment ago. We are about to meet Bob Bray, one of the world's great clockmakers. And now from deepest Yorkshire, here is the man himself, Bob Bray.
And Hi, everybody.
Hello, Bob. Now, Bob, that was fascinating insight into your work, but I've got a question for you that struck me while we were watching that. You say you're the custodian of Sinclair Harding. Why a custodian? Why don't you say boss, owner, director? Exactly what are you the custodian of?
Well, I am obviously the boss and the owner. Well, myself and my wife. We are the boss and the owner. But Sinclair Harding started in 1967, and I took over in 1995 from Michael Harding, one of the founders of the company, and so the company's been going now 54 years, and I hope it'll be going another 54 years and beyond. So I'm not going to be around in 54 years' time. So I'm just a part of this. When I took over, I didn't think it was about me. I thought it was about the company. And Mike Harding, I think he's very pleased to see what he started carry on. I sort of feel as though I'm the custodian, In fact, just today, we had a conversation with a lady who has one of our clocks, and she was asking about the servicing, and we told her that every sort of 12, 15 years we'll take it back and we'll service the clock and make it look like as good as new. And she said, "So I'm really just looking after it for you then." So I guess our customers are custodians of our clocks, so yeah, that's sort of where it came about. But yeah, I am the boss. Or I like to think I am.
Before Sinclair Harding, you were an engineer. Exactly what type of engineering did you do, and did it really prepare you for Sinclair Harding, and why did you switch? I mean, engineers are never out of work, so why did you switch?
Well, I think if I'd have stayed on, I might have been out of work. I worked for a company. I was very proud to work for a company here in Huddersfield. And manufactured. I was there from leaving school. I worked there 23 years. And the company, we made sort of small gearboxes, assemblies, precision parts for aerospace, sort of medical, defense applications. And so I sort of, I knew a bit about gears. I went through the whole thing. Like I say, I started off as an apprentice. I was, had a spell on, development, quality, a little bit of design. But my main sort of expertise was in production engineering. So, I like to make things, or at least have a say in how things were made. So how did I get into this? Well, it was just really by accident. An uncle of mine had a passion for clocks, and I'd sort of helped him out with various projects over the years, made some gears for him. And he actually had a Sinclair Harding clock. And he introduced me to Mike Harding, but the company Sinclair Harding was about a week away from closing down for good. That was in sort of 1995. And when I went to visit Mike the very first time, I looked at the clocks, and I thought, yeah, I can make this. This is actually, the perfect size. It's what I was used to. But I really didn't know one end of a clock from another. But I looked at it's really just a gearbox that's working backwards, so how difficult could it be? But I've subsequently learned that there are a few secrets to making clocks.
Oh, now that's intriguing, Bob. Can't let that escape. Tell us one of the secrets, if you wouldn't mind.
Well, one of the things that Mike Harding told me, and I'm sure other people who have been involved in clocks will have heard this, that if they don't rattle, they won't work. And that, to some extent, is true. But what I found difficult was, there was a few things I found difficult early on. First, I couldn't speak the language. I couldn't speak the language of the clock and watch people. I talked about gears, and they talk about wheels. I talk about gear teeth. They talk about leaves, and I sort of couldn't understand what they were saying half the time. So I spent a lot of time sort of when I was speaking to people, I'd make an excuse to put the phone down get out the horological dictionaries and find out what on earth they were on about, and then pick the phone back up again. So that was one of the sort of areas I found difficult early on. And the other thing, I found it difficult to, as an engineer used to sort of working to tolerances for everything, I couldn't find the sort of anywhere where it was written down what tolerances you should make this to or that to. There's a lot of, you read books and it's about feel and it's about shake. And I, as an engineer, I wanted to quantify that. So I sort of worked out the rules and, made some, had a stab at sort of putting tolerances on, and in the main they worked. And I sort of realized where this sort of, if they don't rattle it, they don't work, sort of saying sort of came from. And it's all to do with making the in my opinion anyway, sort of making the parts, the plates and everything, so everything's in line. Yes, they do need a bit of clearance in there, and in the main now we make parts and we put the clocks together and they work.
I'm sure everyone appreciates that. In particular, your customers, because customers must be a different thing for you once you came to clocks. Because did you have to deal with customers often?
Yeah, that was the difficult thing, because I was in the back. I was sort of in the background as production engineering. They let me out occasionally, but when there was a technical problem and we had to discuss with customers, which were sort of mainly sort of large companies. But yeah, that was the most difficult thing. I within 3 months of me taking over the business, I went to Baselworld. Mike Harding gave me some, well, he actually said to me, he said, if you don't go to Baselworld, then don't buy the business. So I headed to Baselworld after about 3 months, and that was the first exhibition I'd ever been on, and I was just like a fish out of water. I mean, I don't know. And I spent sort of 5 days not taking a bean. And then I had one customer who came along and bought 5 pieces. I had a stab at negotiating with him, but in the end, I just had to accept the price he was prepared to pay. But without him, I'm eternally grateful to him. He was from New York, and without him, I wouldn't be sat here.
Okay. And so let's look at that experience in a little bit more depth. You've gone 5 days with nothing, and then suddenly this guy from New York comes up to you and buys a bunch of clocks. How'd you feel?
Absolutely, it was absolutely fantastic, indescribable. I mean, I'd sort of run out of money at that time, and my wife was actually coming over with my uncle, who had, as I got me into this this new business, I was able to pay for a nice lunch for them. So I was actually sharp enough to take a deposit on the stand. So I wasn't sort of behind the door, so to speak. So yeah, it was great. I was elated because I'd actually sort of thought, well, if I go to Baselworld, and in the early days, I think the sort of retailers and thought, we'll just wait and see whether he's here today, gone tomorrow guy. And after a few years, when I was still coming back, that's when it started to snowball, and we started to get the orders from the retailers. So yeah.
And were you surprised at all at how international the clock trade is? That there were people from New York and other places?
Yeah, I mean, most of our business is export. Well, it has been export. The last 18 months, 2 years have been a bit of a strange time for everybody, I guess. But because we went to Baselworld, we supplied, we made clocks for people all over the world, and very, very little in the UK. You could count the number of orders in the UK on sort of one hand, sort of thing. So yeah, which was great. It was nice to sort of deal with all these, these exotic places. Yeah.
Okay. And did your wife and uncle enjoy the lunch you were able to spring for?
They did. It was expensive because it was Baselworld.
Yes, I know how expensive that is. Bob, you say another thing in the little video we saw that quite interested me. You said if you didn't have CNCs, you might be a little bit embarrassed by them, but how would you do the work without a CNC machine?
Well, I started, all I had when I started were manual machines, and they weren't very good quality. And when I started, I had very little money, and so I couldn't really afford to. If companies were out there to manufacture in sort of small quantities, I couldn't afford to buy components in. And as a production engineer, I thought, if I'm going to be a clockmaker, I'm damn well going to make the parts for the clock. And right from the very get-go, I wanted to make pretty much everything for every clock that we make. So I started off early on with manual machines, and as the sort of volumes grew, and then I found that I couldn't cope. I couldn't cope with the quantities, and I was also. You get distracted. Anybody that's been making something, and the phone rings, and you have to break off and go away and answer the phone. You come back and pick up the wrong drill. Then it's a bit of a catastrophe. Well, not a catastrophe. I did get quite good at bushing pivots early on, pivot holes early on in clock plates because I picked up the wrong drill. But I found that really. I needed to invest in sort of CNC machines, and some of the machines I invested in early on were sort of second-hand machines. But what it enabled me to do was to put the sort of skills that I had into the programs. So, as long as when I came back from the phone, I pressed the right button, then everything was okay.
All right. Pressing the right button. Well, we all know how important that is in today's world. And for more insight into what Bob does, we have another video to watch, which I hope we can be starting soon. And we'll learn even more about what Bob does there up in Yorkshire. Whenever you're ready, technical guys.
So this is our turning section, and we can machine parts here from 300mm diameter down to 0.3 of a millimeter diameter. Here we're machining the bells that are used on our 3-train chiming skeleton clock. We start off with a casting, and it took us a long time to find a company in Yorkshire that could cast the bells. It's a bell material, 80% copper, 20% tin, which gives a nice tone to the bell. Jack, my nephew, is machining the outside profile, after which he will test the bell for its pitch and then make a correction to the pitch, and he corrects them by hand.
So this is the bell I've just taken off the machine from the workshop, and it's 1 mil big in diameter. So I'm just going to test what tune it's got now. So we've got that reading at an A-30, which is 1700 hertz, and what we're wanting is 1046, so we're going to have to take quite a bit off this. These two are already finished. This one will need papering down. I'm going to paper down the top edge on a peg until it reads the right note.
When we first started making bells, I was told that there were only 6 people in the UK that could tune bells. Well, we have 2 people in this company who can tune bells. So here we're making the centre pinions for the 3-train chiming skeleton clock. We use predominantly stainless steel for the pinions. Stainless steel's been hardened, so it's got a toughness about it, and it's perfect for pinions. 3 operations. This is the first stage. We machine this diameter here. And then the final part, there's another 2 operations to get the pinion to this state. So here we've got, this is where the minute hand will go. The teeth will be cut on here, and this is the back pivot. And the way that we make them in small quantities, only in 5s. and this diameter is pretty much perfectly parallel. So here's where we manufacture the fuse E-chains. Most of our clocks have a fuse E-chain. Start off with damping out the outer links, and each of the two holes are then countersunk, a very tiny countersunk. In each chain there's some 512 outer links, 256 inner links, which are heat treated, and 512 pins. We don't actually manufacture the pins. It's one of the very few parts we don't make, mainly because there's thousands of them. Once we've got all the parts together, the first part of the process is to make up a little sub-assembly, which is just an outer link and two pins. And we loose crimp the pins into place. So here Jack's crimping the pins into the outer link, and we make up all the sub-assemblies. Then what we will do is we will assemble the little sub-assembly along with an inner link and an outer link, and we'll just loose crimp it into a short section. So there's the short section. The inner links are heat treated, and once we've got the short length of loosely crimped chain, we then rivet the pins so that they go into the countersink. We have to be very careful with the riveting. If we rivet too hard, they can tighten up the chain. But once they're finally riveted, we then file and paper all the heads off the short lengths. And the final part of the process is just to join all the short lengths together till we get a 6-foot length of chain. So here we are in the polishing department. This is the most labour-intensive part of the process. All the parts come into here as a kit, so when they've been machined, they go back into the stockroom and they're kitted into sub-assemblies, generally sub-assemblies for each clock. It's very easy to destroy everything that we've done in the machine shop, so there's a lot of care and attention at this part of the operation. Every crossing on the wheels, these have been machined on the wire erosion machine, but every crossing is hand finished to a mirror finish, and then the faces are finished. These faces have been roughly prepped and the crossings are about to be polished. Once the parts are polished, we will do a cleaning and an inspection. So we clean the parts, inspect them. If there's any blemishes or faults that need correcting, then they'll be corrected, cleaned again, and then they're ready for electroplating.
After the parts have been polished and cleaned, they're then inspected and brought down here for electroplating. And basically what we do is we do a nickel plate as a first coating, and we try and aim for about 10 microns on the plates and about a 5 to 7 micron coating on the gears. Prevents build-up of the nickel. And we do this by basically, we know that the solution plates 1 micron a minute when it's run at 5 amps per 100 centimeters squared of area. So basically every component that comes through here, we have the surface area, and when we rack them up, we add the surface area up and we can then apply the correct current, and then obviously by the amount of minutes gets us an approximate coating thickness. And after the nickel coating, it's then basically the parts are then rinsed and then they will then go into the gold. If the parts are going to be platinum plated, we then plate on the platinum on top of the gold. So if there's a platinum part in the clock, it will have a flash of gold underneath it.
Thank you for that, gentlemen. Another fascinating look at clockmaking. So, Bob, let's start with a question from me, and then again invite questions from everyone watching at home or wherever. Let's have some questions in. But what's the difference in your mind then between a clock and a watch? And if you had to convert watch lovers to clock lovers, what would you say to them?
Oh boy, if I knew, I'd be a rich man. I always say, when I go to Basel World or any exhibition, I always think it's my job to try and convert 1 or 2 watch collectors into clock collectors. Not necessarily big clock collectors, but to have 1 or 2 clocks. It's hard to do. I don't want to cause offense at all, but some watch collectors can't see a clock. You know, they walk past the clocks and don't even acknowledge, they can't see them. They just, I can understand. But so I think for me, a clock is is for yourself. It's hopefully going to be there for a long time. Something you can hand down. You know, it's not a fashion statement. It's really for yourself, for your own. You know, I mean, some of my customers along and for, you know, the guy is for his study or wherever, and he has it on his desk ticking away, or on a shelf ticking away. So yeah, it's. But I'm not. I struggle with watches because it's mind blowing how many different watches there are, and it's mind blowing also what the watch people are doing. It's absolutely incredible. You know, it's for me as an engineer.
All right, let's jump to a technical question that's come in from the audience, and wondering, do you depth the wheels before CNC drilling the pivot holes, or do you just rely on the tolerances? And then I've got a follow on from that.
Yeah, no, we don't depth the wheel, but we've done a lot of testing with tooth profiles. We have to put, we actually put all the pivot holes in on the nose, and then what we do is we correct the wheel profile. Generally, we leave the pinion profiles as the standard that we use, and then we correct the wheel. And we actually cut. We've done a lot of testing. We've made a sort of large, model, sort of 10 times full size, just to see how the action is, and we can model the action. We use SolidWorks, and we can model the action on SolidWorks, and we actually now cut the wheels with a module that's 0.5 bigger than the pinion, and it's something that you can see when we test the clocks. You can see the errors from the tooth profile, particularly on the great wheel. Where we might have a ratio of 12 to 1. So yeah, but we have to put we put the holes on the correct nominal centers, and then we correct the wheel, and we make them to a fairly tight tolerance as far as size is concerned. I hope that answers the question.
Now, a very intriguing question has come in. And I'm curious to see, because it's a question about balance. I'm curious to hear your answer. Do you emphasize design, finishing, or precision in your clocks? Or are certain models stronger in some areas than others?
All of our clocks have different escapements, generally English escapements, or escapements originally invented by English clockmakers of the past. And they perform, from an accuracy point of view, they perform to different levels of accuracy. I don't get too legged up about accuracy. If I want to something that's going to tell me the time to within a second a month, then I've got it on my mobile phone, to be honest. But certain clocks we've got behind here, we've got a table regulator, and that's accurate to a few seconds a month. We do work to specifications of something like 2 seconds a day, so we can produce accurate clocks where needed. Some of the clocks are hopeless. I have a congreve behind here, and if it keeps telling the time for the length of this interview, then I'll be happy. The different. It's all dependent on the escapement, but we have done a lot of work over the years on spring design, on spring barrel design, on hooks in particular, on the greases for the spring, as I mentioned before, on the tooth profiles. You perhaps won't see in the clock. So it's important that they perform well. And what we've tried to do is to try and make the clocks as efficient as possible. And that way we can reduce the spring sizes, and that way the clock will last longer. Hopefully it won't wear out as quickly.
Okay. One of the things really intriguing about what we just saw is it seems to be, in addition to all the other skills you have to make a clock, you have to know a lot about metals. And so one of the questions that comes in is on that topic. And what are the benefits of using first nickel, then gold, then platinum in the electroplating process?
Well, the nickel is the barrier layer. So we put on, I think, I'm not between sort of 7 and 10 microns, or for you guys in the States, from about 1/10 of a thou to 4/10 of a thou, and that's the barrier layer. And then if we were gold plating, we'd put gold on, something like a micron. Now the alternative is to put on just gold, but you'd have to put it on a very thick deposit. And our clocks are pretty expensive, but that would be even more expensive. So the general practice is to put nickel on. Now, what you have to do is to control the nickel, because if you put too much nickel, then you lose the finish, or you lose the, sometimes we like to have contrasts in finish. So we might grain one and then polish another, and we've got a nice contrast. And if you put too much nickel, then you'll lose the graining. So it's important to control the nickel. The gold, if we're doing a platinum finish, and we used to do rhodium, but the price of rhodium has just got, it's just not practical to do it anymore. It's just not. But the platinum, when we're doing a platinum clock, we'll put gold on. And we put gold on because the platinum adheres better to the gold. We can also see that we've actually put some platinum on, because if we put it straight on the nickel, it can be difficult to see. And it also means I can charge a little bit more.
Well, I hope some of your customers get to see this, Bob.
I hope so too.
Yes. Yes. To jump from the technical to the more generic, another question has come in asking what you see as the biggest risk for both the clock and watch industries. You can only deal with the clock industry if you like. You don't have to talk about the watch. And how have you had to adapt during the pandemic?
The pandemic has been a difficult period. We've been through some difficult periods. When I took over the business, the first phone call that I got was from a guy in Sheffield. Some of you guys will know him very well, called Malcolm Wilde. He's a Yorkshireman, and he doesn't mince his words, but I didn't know him. I picked up the phone, and he said, his opening words were, "Are you mad?" And I was like, "Why?" And he said, "Well, you've bought a clockmaking business, and don't you know the whole clockmaking business in the UK is dead?" And I said, "Well, if it's dead, that's better for me, because there's only me, there's only going to be me around." So we've gone through some difficult times, but we've always done okay. This last 18 months has been the worst, I would say. Literally overnight, all the retailers around the world sort of closed down, and we were left with clocks, and we didn't know what to do. But what Georgina, my daughter, did, she'd got a list of people that had inquired privately, and so we started to contact them. And we managed to take some orders, and we made some more clocks and took some more orders. But we had to let 4 people go. We were 13 people, we're now 9. So we had to let 4 people go. But the good news is that they all got jobs, which was great. So yeah, it has been a difficult time, but we've sort of diversified a little bit. We've got some good machining facilities. So we've been working on some scientific instruments with the local university, Huddersfield University, on some optical instrumentation. And it's been great working with the students. So the students have been coming up here, doing a little bit of work, and we've learned a bit. We've worked on, we did a 4-second pendulum. So it was something like 4.5 meter long pendulum rod with the gravity leg escapement. That was interesting. That was quite a big pendulum with, I think it was about 125 kilo bob.
Wow.
So yeah, we've managed to find work. We're still going, and things are picking up. The retailers are opening. They're starting to order again, much to the dismay of all my guys. They feel like they've had it easy this last sort of 18 months. But yeah, so I'm not saying that we're through it, but I was always optimistic that we'd survive, because we can do so much here, and and we do it well.
Another very fascinating thing, both to see and to hear in the last video we saw, is you mentioned polishing, that it could possibly harm all the work you've done previously on a particular component. But polishing seems like such a gentle activity. How does that destroy something as solid as a piece of metal? You're laughing. Oh, that's good.
Yeah. It is the most. It's the hardest job in the whole process. It's very physically demanding. I mean, my eldest son Dom, he does a lot of the polishing, along with my son-in-law Ben and my nephew, and they've got muscles on muscles, I can tell you. So it is very physically demanding. But you can destroy, like I said, you can destroy everything that's been done in the machining. So you have to be very careful. Also, there's a lot of, it's important that you don't, I mean, I've seen clocks and where, it's obvious that the plates and various components have been all rounded off, and there's drag marks everywhere. People that have made the clocks will know what I'm talking about. So it is really important to have a bit of finesse, and every part needs a different technique. But what I have to say, and I look around at Baselworld, I look around at other clockmakers, and there are people that I really admire as clockmakers. And they use similar techniques to we do for polishing. And I think what we do with that, because it's all done by hand, and I say it's a lot of physical work. It results in a clock that's, I mean, when you look at a machine finished clock, it's got no soul or character. Our clocks have got something about them, and I've always put it down to the finishing and the polishing and the hard work that goes into it. So it's not an easy thing to do by any means.
Okay, I'm sure it isn't. And another intriguing thing about your work is you use a fusee. You continue to use them. Now, why is that? Is it just historically inaccurate? Is it help with the accuracy of the clock in terms of timekeeping? Why do you still use it?
Yeah, it's. I mean, we don't use it on all the clocks, but it's really to even out the torque from the spring. As you wind a spring up, you get more torque as it's wound further up, and at the end of the week, you've got less torque. So it's there just to even out the torque from the spring. I mean, again, we've done a lot of testing and I mean, the spring greases can affect it. The hook on the barrel arbor can affect it. And there's something in the middle of the week when the spring, it sort of all shifts from the barrel out to the from the barrel arbor out to the barrel. So we've spent a lot of time measuring torque, and we have torque curves for every spring and grease combination, and we make the fusee to compensate as best we can. So yeah, it's there for a technical reason, and it looks good. I mean, and with the fusee chains, I mean, the fusee chains are you know, that's we like using the fusee chains. It takes about 2.5 days to make one, and we could easily use a cable, but I think the fusee chains are really set the clocks off, you know.
Excellent. Now, folks, we've got another video to watch so we can develop even more questions to perplex Tom. So to perplex Bob, sorry, somebody named Tom just popped up. More questions for Bob. And technical guys, when you're ready to run the video, please do.
One of the things that we do is we make our own wooden bases. We try to construct them in a traditional way. So we have basically a solid wood frame, which is veneered. And then we have a top, which is also veneered on the top and the edges, which we make from a piece of marine ply. This is quite expensive ply, it's a mahogany ply. When we've constructed the whole thing, the bases are French polished. And we put about 24 coats of French polish on. We build it up over about 2 weeks. We use different veneers, and I always say to my customers, if I can get the veneer, then they can have whatever wood they want. And so one of the first things we do is what they call condition the veneer. So this is a piece of veneer. It's been sandwiched between some newspaper and wooden boards with a lot of weights on, so that it's nice and flat, ready for veneering. So now this is ready to cut out and to veneer to this board to form the top.
The last few years, really, we've focused on a wide range of electronic clocks. Now that varies from clocks with a synchronous motor, that kind of thing, for cricket clocks, to pieces under solar power, to stepper drives and DC motors. So this is a simple mechanism with a stepper motor drive that shows hours, minutes and seconds. Now, one thing we've learned to do as well is incorporate other complexities on top of this. So we do a mechanism with a representation of a tourbillon, and really it's limitless on how far we can go with it. So not only can we do the mechanisms with the single stepper drive, we've also been working on a mechanism with a stepper drive and a DC motor. We've even developed our own PCB. So now we have both the DC motor operating a tourbillon or a dummy tourbillon, and the stepper drive focusing on the minutes, hours and seconds. So this is our clean assembly room. When all parts have been manufactured and processed, they come in here for assembly. And it starts with the sub-assemblies of the fusees, spring barrels and all the gear train. Now, one important feature that we like to discuss is the fact that we use fusee plate bushers. Now, this is the part of the plate that gets the most wear. So every time it's wound, once every 8 days, there's quite a lot of wear that's happening on the bore. We use a bush so that every 10 years or so, when you come back for a service, you can just easily replace it. From the bases, the glass shades, down to the moon phase dials on here. So these are a hand-painted moon phase dial, but we still have to assemble all the brass parts on here.
After all that effort of manufacturing all the parts, polishing, plating, making wooden bases, assembling, we end up with a clock. And here we are in our final test room. Some of these are new clocks, some are clocks that we service, so we look after our clocks. In practice, they come back for a service maybe after 12-15 years. This is a newer version of a table regulator. We have a congreve here, which is an interesting little piece. Poor timekeeper, but an interesting piece. We have a great wheel skeleton clock, a little elegant clock. And this was a clock I made for my wife's 50th birthday, the first rosemary clock. I hope you enjoyed the tour of our workshop facilities. If you've seen something that's of interest and you need to know more, well, just visit our website. It's clockmakers.com. And let's hope we can see you face to face, maybe sometime in the future. Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone. We got to see a greater insight into what Bob does up there in Yorkshire. And one of the things that fascinated me is it seems like you're a cabinet maker in addition to everything else you have to do, all the other skills and crafts you have to master. But please explain to people, Bob, just in case many don't know, exactly what is French polishing and why does it take 2 weeks to do 24 coats?
Well, it should take longer, but I'm quick. I'm self-taught at a lot of these old skills, and it's through necessity. You know, when I took over and throughout the subsequent years, it's always been very difficult to find people that can do the work that's not the engineering side. So, you know, I have had cabinet makers in the past. I have had French polishers in the past, but then they've either fallen by the wayside or the quality's not been up to scratch. And there comes a point when I go, that's enough. We'll learn it ourselves, and we'll do it ourselves. You know, if we can't get the people to do it, we'll do it ourselves. And we've done it with a number of processes. You know, the bell making is one, the cabinet making is another. Engraving, we've sort of taught ourselves to do a bit of hand engraving in the past, and the French polishing is that came about a good few years ago when I say I made the decision. Well, we're going to have to learn it, and I started by researching a lot of things. And I can tell you, if you look at sort of 100 different ways or 100 people who have written, you know, on how to French polish, you probably get 100 different ways. So what you have to do is just read everything you can and then have a go. And I spent sort of weeks and weeks French polishing, and it's basically applying shellac on a sort of what they call a mouse, which is a piece of cloth inside which there's some cotton wool, and you load it up with a French polish, which is in a liquid form, and you work it into the wood. And you have to build it up in sort of very thin layers. If you try and put too much on at once, then what you'll end up with something that doesn't harden off correctly. So you can only do sort of 4 coats at any one go, and then you have to leave it for 2 or 3 hours, and then you come back, do another 4 coats, and then another 2 or 3 hours. And as you build it up, you then occasionally have to sort of rub it back with an abrasive paper, and then continue going. Because what we try to achieve is like a piano finish. And in actual fact, when you get to the end, you've got to leave it for you know, a good few days for it to harden off before you sort of finally French polish. Now, if there's French polishers out there that will go on, hey, that's not how you do it, just drop me a line and tell me how to do it. But it works for us, you know, and it's been a lot of hard work. And every base that we do, I stamp it with a number. I record every layer of French polish that I put on and what processes we do in between. So I can always look back on that work that didn't, because every wood is sort of slightly different. So some veneers take the French polish better than others, and but yeah, it was a long. I had to sort of basically lock myself in our woodworking room for about 3 months while but I eventually got it, I think.
And what about engine turning? Are any of your dials, particularly on the table regulators, are they
No,
engine turned?
no, it's not engine turning. It's like a diamond pattern. We don't have an engine turning machine. I'd love to have one. I'd love to learn how to use one because they look fascinating. But no, we don't have one. We actually do the diamond pattern. We on again on our CNC machine with an engraving tool. So we'd produce that pattern, and I think it's a pleasing effect. We did used to produce it's like a shot blasted finish. I think it's microbriage. I think some people would know it as. Yeah. But we felt that the sort of the diamond pattern looked had a better effect.
Okay, and about your clean room, exactly how clean is it? I mean, what would the guys from Apple or NASA say if they walked into your clean assembly room?
Well, I would hate to think that NASA were using our clean room. It's relatively clean. I think that was my son that said it was a clean room. I mean, where I used to work, they had a fantastic clean room, a laminar floor room. In fact, they built, it was after I'd left, but they made all the gears for the a space probe that landed on a comet. I think it was called Roseanne. I think the space probe, but that was built in a clean room. No, it's not. It's not. Like I say, I'm very proud of our workshop, and our workshop, I hope you see from the video, is as clean as it can be. It's not the same. Probably not the same standard as some of the watchmakers. Ateliers, particularly the Swiss ones, but it's quite clean. But so we have some sort of rules in our clean room. We try not to, if we're working in the workshop, we try not to go in with sort of workshop smocks on. We have to put the white smocks that we have. But it's not a clean room like as in a laminar flow clean room, but it's clean enough for our clocks, I'm sure.
Okay, let's turn to another practical question about the clocks. Generally speaking, how long are the service intervals? How often does the clock have to come back to you? It's
when I first took over, we have a clock, our C clock, which has pendulum bearings in, and early on I did the calculations on the bearings, and the predicted life was about 8 years. But in actual fact, we don't see them for 12. We say about 10 to 12 years for a service. Or be serviced. In practice, it can be 15 years. Sometimes it's 20 years. They are fairly, it's 250-year-old technology. A lot of our customers have their own clock people, the people who service their clocks, and we're quite happy to send the instructions with detailed instructions, videos on how to strip them down, on clean plate bearings or whatever needs to be done, to them, and we're quite happy to supply clock service engineer or service people, with anything that needs to be done to them. But we do get them back. We supply them in a good shipping box, and people send them back, and we sort of upgrade them, and they go back looking like new and sometimes better than new, because the French polish bases actually sort of get better with age, and when they go back, they're just like new. Okay.
Bob, I can see a row of your clocks lined up behind you, and one of the things about them is they all look to me natural. They look created and not handmade, because sometimes things that are handmade can be a little out of balance. They can be a little rough or uneven in places. And I'm curious about the way that you work together, colors, the way you work together, the shapes of the components, the way you work together, the different surfaces and polishing. And to go all the way back to the first thing we saw in the videos, do you think about that? Do you think about making the watch a coherent whole when you're designing it?
The design and the ideas, a lot of them come from our customers. It's very rare I'll sit down with a blank piece of paper and go, oh, well, now I'm going to design a brand new clock. So we have requests from customers. Can we do this? Can we do that? And the first, I am not a designer. I'm not trained as a designer. I think I can design clocks now, but I wasn't trained as a designer. But the first thing for me is sort of, getting the function right. And then we sort of one of the hard things is to get the aesthetics right. It's amazing how many things we design them and they look like chickens. That seems to be, I don't know where that comes from, but I look, what do you think of this, guys? And they're going, it's a chicken, Bob. Okay, but the finish comes towards the ends. I mean, the materials, the only sort of commonality that we have between clocks are really the materials. The brass, the steels that we use, they're common from clock to clock. So at the end comes the finish, and then we all have a discussion. My two sons and daughter, my wife. We get together and we go, right, how are we going to finish this? Are we going to grain this or polish this, to get some sort of contrast? And we've got the options to gold plate or platinum plate. And so we can mix and match the colors. And when the clock's finished, we'll have a look at it and go, get an opinion. If we don't like it, we'll change it, but we've never had a clock sent back for, we've never had a clock sent back, but we never had a clock sent back for because people don't like the finish, or the contrast,
Okay.
So it's a difficult thing to do, but and it's like I say, we just got to gather opinion from a few different people, and then I make the decision.
Okay. Now, we've got a few more questions coming in, and that means we're going to run a little bit beyond our appointed time, our finish at 8 o'clock UK time. So one of the questions I have, Bob, is about the future. One is about the past, and one is about the present. So I'll start with the future. Should things pick up again, very much post-pandemic, would one of your biggest challenges be finding skilled staff to work with you? Or can you just grab someone with enthusiasm and train them to do what you'd like?
It always has been difficult to find skilled staff. And that's why I employ most of my family. Unfortunately, I can't produce anymore. But I do have some grandsons, but they're way off yet. I think things will pick up. I think things are picking up already. So things are picking up already. I mean, we've not exhibited now. Well, we've ruled out this year as far as exhibitions are concerned. So our first exhibition probably will be Basel World next year, which I think is April time now. I think they've announced a date. Things I think are picking up. I think the most important quality for someone is enthusiasm. I've always said that, if a young person comes and knocks on the door and they're keen and they're looking for work, and we'll give them a chance. And we'll what we've tended to do in the past is if we like them and they're enthusiastic, we'll try them out for a couple of weeks, and then at the end of the couple of weeks we'll go. That's assuming that we're looking for people. And at the end of the couple of weeks, if we like them, we'll be honest, and if we don't like them, we'll tell them we don't like them. And then what we tend to do is we tend to put them on an engineering apprenticeship, and then we'll train in-house. So they spend the sort of first year learning the basic engineering skills, and then after that they're here and we can take them under our wing and train them in all the various other skills that's needed.
Okay, now the question relating to the past. If Thomas Tompion, George Graham, and John Harrison walked into your workshop, all three of them at once, what would you say to them?
Well, first I'd have to say you don't need to wear a mask, but please sanitize your hands. And what would I say to them? I mean, John Harrison was born about 15 miles from our workshop. For me, he's an absolute genius. I'd want to ask him, how on earth did you make something like H1 in 1720, whatever it was, with the limited resources you must have had? I mean, just getting materials. How did he? I mean, it's difficult for us now, but how on earth did they do it back in the day? And to start from a blank piece of paper to come up with something like H1, that's what I'd want to ask John Harrison. And he's, like I said, for me, he was just a genius. I'm not sure what I'd ask Graham. I'm not sure what I'd ask, but I mean, we do use his deadbeat escapement, and it's pretty good.
Well, he might ask for royalties, so you might not.
No, he might ask for royalties, but I'm from Yorkshire, and they do say that Yorkshire people are like the Scottish, but with the generosity squeezed out.
Well, I'm sure John Harrison would explain to George Graham that he's not going to get any royalty money from you.
No, he would struggle.
Yeah, and what about Thomas Tompion, who's the father of British horology, who made clocks and watches? Anything to say to him?
I mean, from the history point of view, I'm a sort of poor reader. I can read, but I don't tend to read about the history of clockmaking. I mean, we have made in the past. We made a long case clock, which was in the Thomas Tompion style, and I do like his style. But I said John Harrison's he's the guy for me.
So out of the greats of British clockmaking in the past, Harrison is your big influence, hey?
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely, he's right up there. And he's from Yorkshire.
He's from York. Yes, well, we all know that helps. Now, I said a question about the present. One of the things you mentioned frequently while we've been talking today is family or members of your family who are there working for you or working with you. I'm assuming you do pay your family at least, and
too right. Yeah.
How does that family emphasis affect what Sinclair Harding does? How is it part of the fabric of what the company does?
I'm quite fast. I employ my two sons, my daughter, my wife. Well, we started it together, and I have my brother who's been with me for a long time, sort of son-in-law, nephew, they're all good guys. And the thing about them, they've all got different skills. They've all got the strengths, they've all got the weaknesses, and they're all different. You know, my two sons and my daughter, they've got different skills, and it really works well. I really don't get involved that much in the day-to-day running. You know, I'm quite lucky now. I can come in. I do come in early, but I can come in and basically do what I want. But they do. They are now sort of doing the day-to-day running of the business, and so it works really well. Yeah, it works really well. I think it's important for a team. You can't have all the same people. You know, you've got to have different types of people in a team, and I think we've got that. It's amazing. It sort of shows when, and it's a while since we've done this, but in the sort of run up to a major exhibition, it can be chaos. And it's then when you see how the guys perform, you know, because they all know what they're doing. They're all doing different things, and it's great to watch. You know, it's a good team we have here.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Thank you very much for talking with us today.
My pleasure.
All the clock lovers out there, I hope you very much enjoyed the second episode of Open Dials from the British Alliance of Clock and Watchmakers. A big thank you again to Collected Man, our sponsor. Always elegant, always insightful writing about horology. And we hope to see you all again in the autumn, if you're in the UK, or in the fall, if you are, as I am, in America, for another Open Dial program. And this one will be about Anordane, the watchmaking company in Scotland. So thank you all, and Bob, thank you again. And bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.